Hello, this is author Sherelle Wallace in Eleuthera, the Bahamas. I am doing a PSA on the business of writing, and this is part 2. If you have not seen the introduction, part 1, please go back and check my channel to see it. In part 2, I would like to talk about the term bestseller because, as I had mentioned, I started writing and continue to write as a business and to have an income from the sale of my fiction books. When I first started out in those first few years, and I was independently publishing just on Lulu at the time, I met up with another Bahamian author and we exchanged books. The particular book that I was given by this Bahamian author was in their terms a bestseller. They said that this particular book was a bestseller. And the term bestseller always stood out to me because I always believe that the numbers never lie. So if a book is a bestseller, I wanted to know how that fell on the scale of actual income, actual sales. When I read this particular book, the book seemed as if it had not been edited much at all. And as I spoke previously about my editing mistakes with independent publishing, I knew that this was very typical of new writers. However, this author was not a new writer. This author had been writing and publishing for a very long time. And as you grow in the field, you expect for your work to grow. Besides that, though, there wasn't an issue of just the spelling errors. It was as if the draft of the book really should not have been put out, that it was not completed. When I approached the author about this, they admitted that the draft that they had published, that they had on sale because these books were for sale, and they had been bought by the author in a large quantity. So these books were for sale. The author said that that particular draft was not supposed to be published. So it was a careless excuse, because with the independently published companies, you are advised to order your proof copy, to check your proof copy, and then you can put it on the general market, and of course you can import and sell your books as you wish. So the fact that this book was supposed to have been proofed and not proofed and put on the market and was for sale in this particular format, I again always saw writing as a profession, as a career. You're doing it as a business. The author said that that particular draft should not have been uploaded. Reading the draft, reading the book, the completed work, and it being described as a bestseller, that really set off some alarm bells with me in terms of terms and hype that is put on things that the numbers don't reflect it. So I wanted to clear up this term about bestseller, whether this author was saying that this particular book, in the format that it was in, was the book that sold best for them, or whether it was on the market generally a bestseller. The author did not clear that up. But shortly after, I attended a writer's seminar in Nassau. And during this seminar, the panelists were all of the top professional writers and publishers in the Bahamas. And on the panel, I asked two questions of the panelists. One was if they knew of any writers in the Bahamas who was making their full living strictly from the sale of their books and from writing, because I didn't know any Bahamians who was earning their living strictly from writing. And as an avid reader, of course, I know the John Grishams, the Danielle Steele. I know a lot of non-Bahamians who were making their full living from the sale of their books. And this is what I was going into writing with. Of course, when you look at population, when you look at marketing, when you look at a whole team of people who work behind these authors, I did not expect to make these types of sales. I expected to be able to earn my living from the sale of my books. The term bestseller, what does that mean? The panelists were not able to tell me, any Bahamian in the country. This seminar was in 2011. They were not able to say any Bahamian who was earning their living from writing, and they were very vague about it as well. One of the reasons why I have never taught writing or done instruction in writing is I don't believe in teaching something that you cannot make a lucrative career out of. That saying, those who cannot do teach, I don't subscribe to that. If I am not able to make a living from my writing, I don't believe in teaching writing, because if you're doing it as a hobby, as you're doing it as a side hustle, then state that. But to do it and not be able to earn a living from it, at least a half of what is needed for you, to me, it doesn't make sense. So these professionals on the panel were not able to say to me, yes, I make a living strictly from my writing, or I know this particular person who makes a living from their writing alone. So if there are any Bahamians who are keeping accounts of their work and who have, at the end of the day, they have the money that they need to live their life, and they're doing it from the sale of their books, I would love to know. The other question that I asked the panelists on the 2011 seminar is, what does it mean to have a book that is a bestseller? And one of the response that I got was that in the big scope of things in the world, the US, in the UK, a bestseller is a book, a single title that has had sales of 100,000 copies or more. Considering that we were in the Bahamas at the time, our population was at 350,000. They advise that if a Bahamian author has made sales from a single title of 10,000 copies, that could be considered a bestseller. So it answered my confusion about the author who said that their book was a bestseller, that this author was exaggerating. And because there was no way that this book had sold anywhere close to 10,000 copies. This book, like most independently published books, you can go and you can see the rankings of a book, which basically says how many copies of the books have been sold. And when it comes to bestsellers, that brought me down a rabbit hole of hype and over-exaggeration and just outright lies when it comes to the numbers. If you publish on Amazon and you have a customer who has purchased a copy of your book, even if you have purchased a copy of your book, and Amazon very randomly would do a bestsellers list they would say what has sold and what is considered a bestseller. And sometimes your book could be in a very obscure, very niche market as far as the genre and as far as what is listed as. So if a customer purchases 3 of your book, if you go and you purchase a copy of your book, and Amazon in the next second does a random bestseller survey, your book could be listed because it just sold that second before as a bestseller because it had just been listed. There are all kinds of tips and tricks. And that author could screenshot that list where their book had just sold and their book is on the rank next to a John Grisham or a Danielle Steele. And they can screenshot that and they can say that this is confirmation of their work doing really well. I never pay attention to the fluff because to me the numbers don't lie. If you've had a book that has been downloaded for free, you may have a lot of books sold in the ranks, but at the end of the day, do you have any actual sales from it? If the money is not behind these numbers, then they really don't count. And I find that a lot of authors are hyping up their work like that. And they're saying how much the book has sold and what the book does. But at the end of the day, the numbers don't lie. To be completely transparent, for the last several years, I've needed to earn $15,000, and the Bahamian dollar is on par with the US dollars. So I need to earn $15,000 for my yearly cost of living. Now, I am a single person. I have no dependents. I don't even have a cat. And I own my own home. There is no mortgage on my home, but of course there is a lot of upkeep and maintenance because living on the island, this is part of island life. I have a very old car that of course needs maintenance. But I live that life of being very conscious of what I spent. There has been times in the 18 years since I left my traditional job, my working for someone else, where my expenses were much less than the 15,000. But 15,000 is a ceiling to say, okay, if I comfortably make this in a year, I will be able to support myself of this. And that 15,000, and in some cases, the yearly expenses were 10,000. That does not include vacation. Vacation that's not a word in my vocabulary. And going back to the writing, this is one of the reasons why I hate the term starving artist, because like it's not cute. It's not funny. So vacation is not in my budget. 15,000 being my need for a yearly income. I have never earned 15,000 a year from the sales of my book. In fact, in the 18 years that I have been writing and I have been publishing, I have not earned 15,000 in that entire time. So this is why I don't pay attention to hype, and I don't take writing and sales, especially for a fiction writer who is not out there ghostwriting or who is not writing and editing and doing other writing services for people. I did do a few profiles. There were 10 profiles I did for the Eleutherian newspaper, and that is a story within itself. And again, I did that because I wanted to I do consider writing as a business. So everything I did, I expected to be compensated for financially because writing is a business. So I have not earned 15,000 in the 18 years that I have been writing. My writing sales have definitely not been where I wanted to be, but I have kept very good accounts of every single sale that I've made, and I know what my numbers are. And that is why I take this seriously as a business, and that is why I'm going to continue this series on the business of writing, because I do have a proposal. I hope you would join me and find out what that is.